It is implausible that you would have selected death cap mushrooms without ascertaining how they would work upon your victims.
But her eyes were closed. She certainly appeared to be heavily sedated. She lied and she lied and she lied. She said her children were lying. She said the health officials were lying. Doctors were lying. Don on his deathbed was lying. She said that Ian Wilkinson was lying. She's killed 3 and tried to kill 1 other, left him with lifelong injuries too. You might say she got a pretty good deal here. She was lucky.
Wayne Flower here reporting from the Daily Mail in Melbourne. Now, I've just had to duck away from the Supreme Court to find a quiet spot here just to tell you exactly what's been happening. So, of course, we've come to the conclusion of the Erin Patterson trial. She's been sentenced to 33 years with a non-parole period set then.
The prosecution submitted that I should infer from your pitiless behaviour that your intention to kill was ongoing and that this constitutes an additional aggravating circumstance. I accept that submission. As the Wilkinsons' daughter, Ruth Dubois, remarked in her victim impact statement, you, quote, followed through on your lethal plan. Your lunch guests each suffered severe gastrointestinal illness on the Sunday and Monday prior to being sedated and mechanically ventilated. Their suffering was protracted. And Ian Wilkins suffers ongoing health issues. The prosecution submitted that you must have anticipated that your victims would suffer in the way they did. I am satisfied of that beyond reasonable doubt. It is implausible that you would have selected death cap mushrooms without ascertaining how they would work upon your victims. In addition to denying the use of foraged mushrooms, you engaged in an elaborate cover-up of your guilt. I find that you disposed of the 4 grey plates on which you served the poisoned beef Wellingtons. You falsely made out that you had fed your children leftover beef Wellingtons with the pastry and mushrooms scraped off. You feigned illness. You disposed of the dehydrator soon after you were released from hospital. You maintained the vague story about sourcing dried mushrooms at an Asian grocery and had the gall to tell police in your recorded police interview that you had been very, very helpful to the health department in its investigation of the incident. You disposed of your phone and provided police with a dummy phone. You lied to the police in your recorded police interview about various matters. Finally, and most importantly, your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust. Your victims were all your relatives by marriage. More than that, they had all been good to you and your children over many years, as you acknowledged in your testimony. Not only did you cut short 3 lives and cause lasting damage to Ian Wilkinson's health, thereby devastating the extended Patterson and Wilkinson families, you inflicted untold suffering on your own children, whom you robbed of their beloved grandparents. For the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson, I sentence you to 25 years imprisonment. For the murder of Heather Wilkinson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Gail Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Don Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. All sentences are to be served concurrently. The total effective sentence is life imprisonment, and I fix a non-parole period of 33 years.
Today's sentence, of course, was run live for the very first time in the Supreme Court on television. It's an extraordinary thing to do, and you wonder whether it's something that we might see again. But such was the public interest in this trial, in this person, Erin Patterson. Today, people were lined up around the corner down William Street trying to get into that court to watch Erin Patterson go down. Outside court as well, massive media pack. We had helicopters flying over the top. They'd followed her all the way to court and no doubt back to Dame Phyllis Frost. It brings to the conclusion 2 hard years of misery for her victims. Of course, Don and Gail Patterson died after eating the beef Wellingtons. Heather Wilkinson also succumbed from her injuries, awful internal injuries, after eating that beef Wellington, and Pastor Ian Wilkinson survived. So today I was up close and to Erin Patterson, within a couple of metres away from her, and it was a Well, it was an unusual experience watching her. Erin Patterson appeared subdued from the get-go. At the start of her sentence, she was seemed to be awake, and she was paying attention, blinking furiously, as she has often done through the trial. But as the sentence went on and on, she appeared to almost fall asleep. I mean, she couldn't have been sleeping, but her eyes were closed, and she certainly appeared to be, heavily sedated, which would make sense, of course, given the traumatic experience of being sentenced. For Erin Patterson, she's likely to die in jail. Despite being able to go for parole now after 33 years, she's already spent close to 2 years behind bars. She's going to be 81 or so by the time she's even allowed to think about applying for parole. Whether she makes it that long and the awful jail conditions that she faces, we're going to have to wait and see. The only reason she received a non-parole period at all today was due to those atrocious jail conditions that she is living through. She spent the last 15 months in Dame Phyllis Frost's Gordon unit. It's a protection unit. She is there pretty much 23 hours a day by herself alone. And Justice Beale, in delivering his sentence today, it was really the only factor that he could take into account to give her that non-parole period. If it wasn't for those conditions, she for sure would have just had life without parole. She had practically no mitigating circumstances that she could call upon. She had pleaded not guilty. She ran a trial. She put all of the victims through having to give testimony. Quite the ordeal. These are the things that would normally give you some sort of discount on your sentence. She also couldn't display any real forms of mental illness. A lot of the times you'll hear, particularly when you're in onerous jail conditions such as Erin Patterson, that you're suffering from depression, that you're suffering from a mental illness that'll make you do harder time than anyone else. Erin Patterson refused to subject herself to anything like this, any sort of analysis by a forensic doctor who may have been able to help get her a discount on that sentence. We'd heard somewhat through the trial and in behind the scenes pre-trial that she was a high-functioning autistic. She was on the spectrum, Asperger's, but yet again, no real doctor's evidence to back those claims. So Justice Beale had not a lot to work with other than the atrocious conditions that Erin Patterson is living in and likely to live in for the foreseeable future. Due to the notoriety of her, she is likely to remain notorious, infamous for many, many years to come. So Justice Beale had to weigh up and say, look, she's likely to remain in solitary confinement. Look, it's hard to say, but a long, long time. And during the pre-sentence hearing, he suggested that some of these conditions might be seen as inhumane. Throughout the pre-sentence hearing, when Ian Wilkinson was giving his victim impact statement, we saw Erin Patterson appear to be choking back some tears. But, I was sitting within a metre and a bit from her. I couldn't see any real tears. And really, it is that kind of behaviour from Erin Patterson that sort of first brought her to the attention of the media in the first place. I was there back when this all began. We had responded to what was a short sort of article in The Australian by John Ferguson that some people had died after consuming a lunch out there in Leongatha. When I arrived at Erin Patterson's house, she gave one of the 2 interviews she did at the time where people suggested, wow, that appeared to be like crocodile tears. I was up close. She locked me in her front yard at the time, along with some other media. We had to scurry over a fence to get out of her property. At the time, I thought to myself, who is this person? How could this be? She seemed like a normal sort of, mother. It was hard to fathom that she could be responsible, willingly responsible, deliberately responsible for this crime. Over the next day or so, I came face to face with Erin Patterson again. She looked me in the eye and gave me a bit of a serve for trespassing on her property. I tried to explain to her that I wasn't trespassing, that she'd locked me in her front yard and I was trying to get out. Some words were exchanged, and it was really at that time, after looking at her in the eye, I thought to myself, maybe there's something more to this case. So, over the next weeks and months, we pretty much lived down there in Leongatha, trying to uncover what had happened, trying to speak to everybody who knew her. The fact that her phone was never found, it could have been a massive thorn in the sides of police tasked with bringing her to justice. In the end, and this was a 10-week trial, Detective leading Senior Constable Stephen Eppinstall, he managed to do enough without ever having that phone. What was on that phone, we will never know. But what police did find on her computer was some pretty damning evidence all the same. They found her searches for death cap mushrooms, which on this iNaturalist website, and then through the phone's records that they did have, they were able to find, within no reasonable doubt, that she did go to these locations where death caps were found, harvested these death caps, put them in a dehydrator which she had just bought, and used them to kill her in-laws. Now, a lot of things went against the prosecution in bringing Erin Patterson to justice. The phone data in itself, there were probably elements where the jury may have thought, it's not straight down the line. I might have some doubts about that. They also had one doctor who testified that he believed she was sick following that lunch. We heard from numerous doctors, nurses, health officials who all told the jury that, they didn't quite believe that Erin Patterson was sick. The information they had, the things they saw, didn't quite tell them that she was sick. They had doubts, and obviously the jury did too. And by the time it came to the end of that trial, the prosecution case, they were showed her record of interview with Detective Eppinstall, where Erin Patterson told lie after lie after lie. These were lies conceded by her own defence at the start of the trial. They admitted she had told lies. She had told lies, they said, because she panicked. She had tried to suggest that Simon Patterson had put it on her from the get-go, is that the dehydrator you used to kill my parents? Simon Patterson denied he ever said that. He said that in court. So Erin Patterson was faced then at the end of the prosecution trial with the dilemma. As it stood, Colin Mandy had done what he could do, her barrister, to the best of his ability, to try to paint some sort of reasonable doubt to the jury. By the time Detective Eppinstall had finished giving his evidence, she appeared to be in a lot of trouble, and really Mr. Mandy had no alternative but to put Erin Patterson in the witness box herself and to save her own skin. Well, we now know, fate says, that she did a terrible job. She lied and she lied and she lied. She said the children were lying. She said the health officials were lying. Doctors were lying. Don on his deathbed was lying. She said that Ian Wilkinson was lying. Ian Wilkinson gave compelling evidence to the jury. He's a pastor. It just comes across as a very decent individual, and she had branded him a liar. When the jury had to go then and do their deliberations, you can only think that they had to push Erin Patterson's evidence to one side and go back to the start of that trial one by one, go through everyone's evidence, and at the end of it think, do we really have any sort of doubt here that she has done what we believe she's done? In the end, they came back with a verdict. She was guilty. Today, as Justice Beale read out his sentence, it went for some 45 minutes, he really brought it home that Erin Patterson, she was calculated. She had planned these murders for some time. How far back, it's hard to say, but for sure they say that the moment she asked her lunch guests out to lunch at church at the end of June, she was planning to kill them. She had cooked up a fake cancer diagnosis to lure them to this lunch. She had wanted the Wilkinsons there so she could get her estranged husband Simon Patterson to that lunch. She'd had his parents, she'd had his uncle, his aunt. She wanted Simon there. She clearly wanted to feed him a poisoned Wellington too. Simon Patterson pulled out at the last minute. Yet Erin Patterson chose to go ahead with that lunch. Why she chose to go ahead with that lunch, only she will be able to answer that question. What happened after that was gone into great detail by Justice Beale today too. Her cover-up. At any stage, she could have told the health officials, I'd foraged those mushrooms. She cooked up a story that she bought them from an Asian grocer, and she stuck with that story through to the bitter end. Whether she had confessed earlier and said, look, I'd foraged those mushrooms, could have they acted more quickly, the doctors, to give the antidote to her victims that would have maybe saved them? We don't know. It doesn't really matter now because sadly they died, and they've died in a really horrendous way. Dramatic scenes outside. Ian Wilkinson came out and faced the media after that sentence. He has been very, very quiet. He's been very dignified in the way that he has handled himself throughout this entire process, from the start through the trial. He went to nearly every day of that trial. He would be polite to the media outside. He'd say hello. He'd go in, and he had just a, dignified approach to everything. He was like that again today outside of court. He gave thanks to everyone who had helped them get to this verdict and get to this sentence. I think the most important thing that Ian Wilkinson had to say, and it really just showed the kind of character that man is, he just asked people to be kind to each other. That was his message. Be kind to each other, and what a important message it is.
I want to say thank you to the many people from across Australia and around the world who, through their prayers and messages of support, have encouraged us. We're thankful that when things go wrong, there are good people and services and systems available to help us recover.
Today, she starts what'll be, I guess, another 31 years behind bars. Should have she got life without parole? Some would argue, yes, there's been many cases of people who have killed maybe one person and have received longer jail sentences than that. But she's killed 3 and tried to kill one other, left him with lifelong injuries too. So, you might say she got a pretty good deal here. She was lucky. Will she appeal the severity of that sentence? We'll wait and see. She has 28 days to get that happening. Can she afford her barrister, Colin Mandy? I'd like to say I don't think she's got the money to cover it. The house that she owned, this multi-million-dollar house in Leongatha, has had a freeze on it. It's no longer hers. The police have possession of that, and they will sell it and probably give money of that to her victims. She'll likely have to rely on Victorian legal aid. This is a taxpayer-funded legal service. She is going to have to convince them that it is in the interests of justice for them to use taxpayer-funded money to run this appeal. Can she appeal conviction? Probably yes. She got a pretty good run too at that trial. There was a lot of things thrown out of her trial that went her way. Some of that stuff we still can't quite tell you all about. But after the 28-day appeal process comes to its conclusion, we'll likely be able to tell you about that too. So we wait and see now. Is the story of Erin Patterson over? It could be. I say we probably haven't seen the last of Erin Patterson, and we can only hope that Erin Patterson, when she finally gets a chance at parole in her 80s, has learned her lesson.